Right now, wherever you are, there is almost certainly a light bulb within a few feet of you, and there is almost certainly a phone within reach of your hand. Two of the most important inventions in human history, sitting in the same room, so ordinary you stopped noticing them years ago. You know the names attached to them. The light bulb belongs to Thomas Edison. The telephone belongs to Alexander Graham Bell. Those two names are carved into every classroom, every textbook, every list of the men who built the modern world. There is a third man who was in the room for both of them. He drew the drawings that won Bell the telephone patent, and he invented the process that made the light bulb last long enough to actually be worth selling. He worked directly for Edison, and when Edison's original electric light company gathered its founding pioneers, the small circle of men recognized as having built the electrical age, he was one of them. The only black one. His name was Lewis Howard Latimer, and if you have never heard it, that is the entire point of this story. He was standing at the exact center of the two inventions that light and connect the modern world, and the world kept the names of the men on either side of him and let his go dark. This is his story. Welcome to Behind the Throne. Start with where he came from, because it makes everything after it almost impossible to believe. Lewis Latimer was born on September 4, 1848 in Chelsea, Massachusetts. His parents, George and Rebecca Latimer, were fugitives. They had escaped slavery in Virginia and fled north, and George Latimer's case had actually become famous. He was one of the enslaved people whose capture in the North, under the laws that let slave catchers reach into free states, became a rallying point for the abolitionist movement. So Lewis Latimer was born into a family that had run for its freedom and very nearly lost it, in a country that still, at the time of his birth, legally regarded people like his parents as property that could be dragged back south. There was no path laid out for a boy like that. There was no money, no schooling to speak of, no family fortune, no connections. What there was the boy himself, and a quality that would define his whole life. He taught himself things, relentlessly. Whatever he needed to know, he found a way to learn it, with no institution helping him do it. When the Civil War came, Latimer, still a teenager, joined the United States Navy and served aboard a gunboat until the war ended in 1865. Then he came home, a young black man with no education and no prospects, and he got a job as an office boy at a firm of patent lawyers in Boston, a company called Crosby & Gould. A patent law firm needs precise technical drawings, the exact detailed illustrations that have to accompany an inventor's application to the patent office showing how the machine works. Those drawings were made by skilled draftsmen. Lewis Latimer was the office boy who ran errands, and he sat and he watched the draftsman work, and he decided he was going to learn to do it. He bought some used drafting tools. He studied the men doing the job. He taught himself mechanical drawing, one of the most exacting technical skills of the era, a thing that required you to understand how an invention actually functioned in 3 dimensions, and then render it perfectly on paper, entirely on his own, in the corners of a job where he was the lowest ranked person in the building. And he got good. Good enough that the firm promoted the office boy to draftsman, good enough that he became the head draftsman. A self-taught son of fugitive slaves with no formal education was now the man the patent lawyers trusted to draw the inventions that would define the age. And in 1876, one of those inventions walked through the door. A young professor named Alexander Graham Bell came to the firm. He had built a device to transmit the human voice over a wire, the telephone, and he was in a desperate hurry, because he was not the only one. A rival inventor named Elisha Gray was working on the same idea, and it was a race to the patent office, where the first to file could win the rights to one of the most valuable inventions in history and the loser could get nothing. Bell needed his patent application drafted, and the drawings done, and done exactly right, because a flawed application could sink the whole thing. The man who did that work for him was Lewis Latimer. Latimer prepared the precise technical drawings that accompanied Bell's telephone patent, the illustrations that translated Bell's idea into the formal language the patent office required, and the race was as close as races get. Bell filed his application on February 14, 1876. Elisha Gray filed a competing claim the very same day, by most accounts just hours later. The telephone patent went to Bell. Hours. That is the margin by which Alexander Graham Bell became one of the most famous and wealthy inventors in history instead of a footnote, and the drawings that helped get his application through the door in time were drawn by a black draftsman whose name would never appear on the patent, because that is not how patents work. The invention belongs to the inventor. The man who rendered it flawlessly, under deadline in a photo finish, goes on to the next job. Lewis Latimer went on to the next job, and the next job was the light bulb. Here is the thing about the light bulb that the textbook version leaves out. Thomas Edison did not invent the idea of electric light, and the bulb he famously demonstrated in 1879 and 1880 had a serious practical problem. It did not last. Edison's early bulbs used a carbonized filament, an early version used carbonized bamboo, and the light worked, but the filaments burned out quickly. A bulb that dies fast is a laboratory curiosity, not a product. To actually replace gas lamps in every home and street in the world, which is the thing that made the light bulb a revolution rather than a demonstration, you needed a filament that was durable, that could survive the punishing heat, and that could be manufactured cheaply and consistently at mass scale. The famous invention of the light bulb was not really the moment of first light. It was the long, unglamorous problem of making the light last and making it affordable. And that problem is where Lewis Latimer comes in. In 1880, Latimer left the patent firm and went to work for a company called the United States Electric Lighting Company, run by an inventor named Hiram Maxim, a direct rival of Edison, determined to beat him in the race to light the world. And Latimer, who had spent years drawing other men's inventions, now started making his own. He threw himself into the study of electricity and filaments, and in 1882, Lewis Latimer, together with a colleague named Joseph Nichols, was granted a patent for an improved process of manufacturing carbon filaments. This is the contribution that matters, and it is worth being precise about what it was, because precision is what protects this story. Latimer did not single-handedly invent the light bulb. Many hands, over many years, built the light bulb. That is true of nearly every major invention, and anyone who tells you one person did it alone is selling a myth. What Latimer did was solve a piece of the durability and manufacturing problem. A better way to produce carbon filaments and attach them, a method that helped make the filaments more durable and the bulbs more practical and affordable to produce in quantity. That is not a small footnote. That is close to the whole ballgame. Because the light bulb only changed the world once it became something you could mass produce cheaply and that would keep burning, and making the filament manufacturable and durable was exactly the kind of problem standing between impressive demonstration and in every home on Earth. Latimer's work sat squarely in that gap. Some historians of the field have gone so far as to argue that Latimer, as much as Edison, deserves to be called an inventor of the modern practical light bulb. The honest version is that he was one of the essential people who turned Edison's fragile demonstration into a durable, affordable, world-changing product. And then came the twist that makes his career almost too neat, because after years of working for Edison's rival, Lewis Latimer went to work for Edison himself. In 1884, Latimer joined the Edison Electric Light Company, and Edison did not hire him to sweep floors. Edison hired him because Latimer had become something rare and extremely valuable, a man who understood the electrical technology deeply and understood the patent system just as deeply, the engineering and the law, both. That combination made him, in the words of the record, indispensable. Latimer supervised the installation of electric lighting systems in major cities: New York, Philadelphia, Montreal, London, the physical wiring up of the modern electrified world. In 1890, he wrote a book, Incandescent Electric Lighting, a practical description of the Edison system, a black man, self-taught, writing the definitive technical manual on how the Edison lighting system actually worked. And he became Edison's weapon in court. This is one of the most telling details in the whole story. When Edison's company went into the vicious patent litigation wars of the era, suing rivals for infringing its lighting patents and defending its own, they needed an expert witness who could stand up in a courtroom and explain, with total authority, the history and mechanics of electric lighting and who had invented what. The man they put on the stand again and again to defend Thomas Edison's patents was Lewis Latimer. He knew the technology cold, he knew the patent history cold, and he knew it in part because he had helped build both. The black draftsman who would never have his own name on the famous patents was the man Edison trusted to defend those patents in front of a judge. In total, Lewis Latimer held patents for 7 of his own inventions. Not just the filament process, an early forerunner of the air conditioner, an improved toilet for railroad cars, a locking rack for hats and coats, and more. He was a genuine inventor in his own right, over and over across decades. And in 1918, the recognition came in the one place it could: Edison's circle formed a group called the Edison Pioneers, a small elite body of the men who had been at the very center of the birth of the electrical industry, the founding generation of the electrified age. There were only a few dozen of them. To be named an Edison pioneer was to be officially recognized as one of the people who had built the modern world of electric light. Lewis Latimer was a charter member, the only African American among them. In a country that was in 1918 segregated by law, where lynching was a regular horror and black Americans were denied the vote across much of the nation, this self-taught son of two people who had escaped slavery sat in the founding circle of the electrical age, recognized by the men who had lit the world as one of their own. So why don't you know his name? The answer is not that anyone stole a patent from him. He held his patents, his name is on them in the records to this day. The answer is subtler, and in a way more revealing because it is about how fame actually gets distributed. History does not remember contributors. It remembers headliners. It compresses. The story of the light bulb becomes Edison invented the light bulb, a single man and a single moment, because that is a story a child can hold in one hand, even though the truth is a decade-long relay of many people solving many problems, of whom Edison was the most famous and the best at claiming the spotlight. The story of the telephone becomes Bell invented the telephone, and the draftsman who drew it and the rival who lost by hours both vanish from the sentence. The people who make an invention work, the ones who solve the durability problem, who draw the flawless patent, who wire the actual cities, who defend it in court, are the machinery behind the name, and the machinery does not get remembered. It gets used, and then it gets forgotten. For a black man in that era, the forgetting was doubly certain, because on top of the ordinary way history discards contributors in favor of headliners, there was the specific, deliberate erasure of race. The American story of invention had a shape it wanted to keep. The lone white genius, the Yankee tinkerer, Edison in his lab, a self-taught black son of fugitive slaves at the center of it did not fit that shape, and so, in the popular retellings that hardened into common knowledge over the 20th century, he was simply left out. Not accused of anything, not stripped of his patents. Just quietly filtered out of the story, the way Nathan Green was filtered out of the whiskey and Garrett Morgan was filtered out of the traffic light, dropped from the sentence until the space closed over. And here is the cruelty specific to Latimer, the thing that makes his erasure almost ironic. His entire profession was the preservation of credit. A patent draftsman's whole job is to create the precise, permanent record that proves who invented what, to protect an inventor's claim to their own idea for all time. Lewis Latimer spent his life building the paper trail that made other men's fame permanent and legally secure. He drew the drawings that locked in Bell's telephone. He testified in court to defend Edison's patents. He was, professionally, the guardian of other people's credit, and his own credit was the thing that slipped away. He did not slip away because of a lack of documentation. That is what makes him different from the enslaved inventors whose records were never allowed to exist. Latimer's record is excellent. The patents are filed, the book is published. The Edison pioneers wrote a tribute when he died. The documentation is all there. He was erased not by a gap in the record, but by the storytelling that sits on top of the record, by the way a country decides which of its documented facts to put in the textbook and which to leave in the archive. The facts of Lewis Latimer were always available. The country simply chose, for most of a century, not to tell them. Lewis Latimer died on December 11, 1928, in Flushing, Queens, at the age of 80. He had been, in one lifetime, a fugitive son, a Union sailor, a self-taught draftsman, the man who drew Bell's telephone, the co-inventor of a filament process that helped light the world, the author of the standard text on the Edison system, the man who wired cities on 2 continents, Edison's expert witness, a holder of 7 patents, a poet and a musician in his spare hours, and the only black founding member of the Edison Pioneers. When he died, the Edison Pioneers, the circle of white men who had built the electrical age alongside him, wrote a tribute. They called him broad-minded and versatile, a linguist, a devoted husband and father, and said his genial presence would be missed from their gatherings. It was, for its time, a real and warm acknowledgement from the men who had known exactly what he was worth, because they had watched him do the work. The world outside that room took much longer. For decades, the standard story stayed the same. Edison and the light bulb, Bell and the telephone, 2 white men and 2 clean inventions. The room they worked in emptied of everyone else. It has only been in recent decades that Latimer's name has started to surface again, that a house he lived in was preserved as a museum in Queens, that his drawings and patents were pulled back into the light, that school children began, here and there, to learn that the light bulb and the telephone had a third man standing between them. So here is what to carry out of this. The next time someone tells you Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, you will know that the sentence is a compression, that behind that one name stood a relay of people, and that one of them was a self-taught black man, born to parents who had run from slavery, who solved the problem of making the light last, who wired the cities it lit, and who defended the patents in court. And the next time you pick up a phone, you will know that the drawings that won Bell his patent by a margin of hours were drawn by the same man. He spent his whole life making other men's names permanent. It is worth learning his. Lewis Howard Latimer, the third man in the room, in the light of a bulb he helped make last, on a phone he helped draw into existence. The world kept the names on either side of him and let his go dark. It does not have to stay that way. Now you know it.